Any questions? Are you good to go?
Is it fine? And yeah, the only thing that they don't have any PowerPoint, just yeah.
Do they want this up?
I
I can also just put up a screenshot of like the WAC thing if you want. Whatever they end up.
they ask for this one,
Yep, then I'll go.
but let me know how I can do that on the as for you
Oh, yeah,
for
I'll show you that
IWAC.
for later. In
Yeah.
But we're trying to be very good. This is and then how long to language trainings.
See, you want to start some little submission maps?
Yeah.
You should have, I'll whack back on the development section.
Well, they were new person that.
I did. It's also already. Yeah, I'm talking about it in the workshop.
Well.
Yeah, like 10 or so interested.
Pretty sure suggested I did say this for some other than that's. But still, that's. And then not necessarily, because, you know, either like this or everything,
Yeah.
which is. Different from the that.
all that fun stuff.
Yeah, we don't have much
Right.
going on, so.
I like it. That's so much easier. I'm good with that.
Just
Yeah, what you got for me?
is it fine? Is it normal that I cannot put anything in chat from this?
Yes.
Okay.
So on Zoom in here, the chat is disabled and you have the Hoover chat on your computer instead.
Okay.
So whenever you want, if you want to leave a chat, just make sure you do it on your computer. And if you want, we can also move this out of the way. I'm just gonna move this down here. That way, it's kind of just a little bit less intrusive, at least to me. And it goes that way.
Okay, wait,
All right.
thank you.
And then this room has a clicker. You guys have any slides?
No, they
Need
don't.
for the clicker? Yes. Those clickers are being annoying. Only. Oh, the mine's off.
Yeah.
So let me just, all we're gonna do is we're gonna go into the Zoom. And no, I'm looking for these guys. That's what I was looking for. Just want to check that. That's the right one. That's the right one. Do a little bump up.
1, 2, 3. 1.
Yep, I see. I saw it move too. All right. You're good to go.
To the Wake Forest methodological approaches and tools for building sustainable agriculture. That's a new progressive exactly.
I will leave it entirely, just in case it goes pretty wrong. And you guys have the drill already with the phone? the virtual speakers. You can actually put it on Facebook.
So,
But it's better to ask it for
transforming
public
WAC
area.
activity, this elder,
They have had good luck.
rethinking English curriculum, curriculum, which I should go to. City
I think that's what I. Yeah.
I should go to that.
So I'll go to G6 tomorrow.
We start right now, 3:30 or 4:30 rather. 4:30, okay. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for those of you who are here in person. Do we have anybody online right now? Nope, nobody online right now. Okay, that's all right. Maybe they'll join us in a little bit. Well, I'm Chris Baskier. I work at Auburn University in the Office of University Writing, and we're here to talk about the edited collection, Writing Worldviews, that will come out of this conference. And I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves. I'll pass the mic down and I'll pass out the CFP while they are doing that.
I'm Maureen Matheson, and I'm at the University of Utah. And we no longer actually have a WAC program. But for probably a very long time, I actually established a WAC program or a WID program within the whole College of Engineering years ago, and still am engaged, I guess, with administration in terms of writing across the disciplines. And I also teach science writing and collaborate with biology and chemistry.
Hi, I'm Terry Zawacki, and I'm emeritus. I've been doing this a long time, and from George Mason University.
Hi, I'm Magnus Gustafsson out of Sweden at the University of Technology there, where I've developed a multi-program writing program for many years. And I've been working on the WAC Clearinghouse for WAC publications for a few years as well.
We have two other co-editors who aren't here today. Justin Nichols, he's at UW Stout, and Sue Hum, who's at University of Texas, San Antonio. We're going to make them do all the work since they're not here now. So just a brief overview introduction of the thrust of the collection. We're interested in, as we say in the CFP, the power of language and of writing to affect worldviews, especially in the context of social justice, linguistic justice, global turmoil, so on and so forth. And so we have a kind of general idea of the kind of submissions that we're looking for. We're definitely interested in empirical work, and we're interested in empirically driven theoretical work. So maybe it's not doing the empirical research itself, but maybe it's drawing from, synthesizing, elaborating on existing work. And then we do welcome reflective, more narrative or essayistic pieces, but they need to be very theoretically rich. So we're not just looking for pieces that are saying, here's what I did in the classroom, or here's what I did with my program, without that kind of larger apparatus that is helping to ground it in the scholarship. And then as you thumb through the CFP, you can see we have a few different sort of suggestive areas for you there. The role of WAC-WID in addressing access, equity, social justice, and social justice literacy. The role of WAC-WID in a time of global turmoil. WAC-WID as a transnational movement. WAC-WID scholars as agents of change, and WAC-WID and the relationship between the academy and the professions. These are meant to be generative, not exhaustive necessarily, but we are hopeful that these will, there you go, that these will help get you all thinking about how your presentations and your current research might be in line with what the volume is going to end up looking like. I'm going to pass the mic over to Terry, who's going to talk a little bit about moving from a conference presentation to a chapter. But I do just want to say that we're going to have ample time for discussion, questions, idea generating as well.
Excuse me. So when we were talking about how we wanted to approach this panel and talk about the CFP, I had suggested, and Magnus and I are both, I should have said, co-editors of a book series, International Exchanges on the Study of Writing. So we have seen things that have been papers that are turned into what, well, they still might look like papers instead of chapters meant to be something that was read that is now going to be written. So I thought I would talk about, well, what is the difference between a conference paper and a chapter proposal? And so, and some of these things are going to be like, yes, of course, that you're going to say, but bear with me. So it's, their papers at a conference are very different. There's a time constraint with the time that you have for your panel. And even well-crafted papers are generally, even that they might be read by presenters, they're written with time and other constraints in mind, including the conference theme and the audience. This conference theme is so broad that we don't have that same thematic constraint. We also have a much broader audience than what is just what are the folks that are here at this conference, because WAC stretches so far and is such a wide umbrella for everyone. A chapter then is going to have to, it can be much more detailed. It will need to contain the expected scholarly apparatus. It will be written in a style that might be more densely academic than what was in a conference presentation. It may include material that responds to questions that were asked at your presentation, if you did a presentation. If you didn't do a presentation, maybe you went to panels where you thought, oh, that's more of what I also want to say. And by the way, if you did not do a presentation at this conference, but you still want to propose something, you can. It doesn't have to be correct. I think we decided you don't have to have presented at the conference. I think it's nice you're here, and thank you for coming. So it can respond to topics that you've heard on a similar theme as you've been attending panels. And the chapter can obviously be revised, written and revised. You'll get lots of feedback from editors, and you can pursue even in greater depth. So in short, the greater length without the time constraints, without the same kind of audience constraints, allows you much more room to work and explore your ideas. And then Chris, in a voice appropriate to an academic publication. And then Chris mentioned the theoretical framing and a reflective piece that, so in other words, it would be something that's not solely, here's what I did in my institution and it was good.
Yes. If I could just add one item to the extended text and the lesser time constraint, etc. One of the things that we often see in the International Exchanges series is lack of context for the specific site. So a lot of things we take for granted in this context will not work with an international reader or a wider readership at least. So remember those elements in your pieces.
And I just want to add that on average, if you give, for example, a 20-minute talk, that's an 8-page paper. So if we're really talking about, and that's not a lot of depth. So the one thing that you want to think about also is how, given what Magnus and Terry have said, is how are you going to integrate those into what you have already to create more depth?
And I thought I would talk for just a quick minute about sort of timeline and process as well. You can see it on the second and onto the third page for what we are imagining. So we're going to be asking that submissions be turned in by September 30th, and Part of the reason for that is so that as Magnus reminded us, a lot of our European colleagues are finishing up a term in mid-September, and so we wanted to give some time after that. And so we're asking for those 250 to 300 word abstracts. And then as an editorial team, we'll be making kind of first determination on acceptances at that point in time, and asking for the full, or not acceptances, but asking for full manuscripts. And there may be some that we say, no, thank you, this doesn't sound right. And then the complete manuscripts for your chapters would be due in November, probably mid-November-ish. And at that point, we will be thinking about another level of inclusion, exclusion, but also starting to compile it. Sorry, the invitations are in November. Yeah, sorry. And then the manuscripts are coming in February. And we do plan to send the completed manuscript out for peer review, with the goal of still getting individualized feedback on chapters from the reviewers, so that your individual piece will get some attention as well. Then trying to get those back to you early, the first half of 2024, with revisions second half of 2024, and ideally a target publication in early 2025, so that it'll be out before the next IWAC conference comes about. And then I think Maureen and Magnus, we're going to talk a little bit about perspectives on international contributions as well.
You first.
So at least we make the comment fairly frequently that it is a transnational movement, that we're seeing WAC ideas transformed and exported or imported in other contexts. And we have an international sort of dimension, even, or I shouldn't say even, but also within US higher education. So exploring that dimension of WAC and WAC's potential for the international audience and the international student or multinational student is something that seems timely given the theme of the conference.
Yeah, I think we're looking for perspectives that can enrich the way we think about and the way we do research and the way that we teach in our own institutions, wherever those institutions may be, and to use those ideas to, I think, further the goals of what we want, and that is to be there for our students and to think about what we do. I think not only as being useful to our own context, but what others may be able to glean from that, and to learn from each other.
And I think that's all we have to say for ourselves. So like I said, we're going to have ample time for questions and discussion. So what are you all wondering about? What would you like to ask? We'll pass the mic around as people want to talk. You'll do the round? Okay.
I'm just sitting around.
So I just wanted to refer to this last point that you mentioned, that you're welcoming international. Oh, okay. I don't, yeah. Okay, yeah. So I'm just curious if, because the terminology in the call is US centric, so it's WAC-WID, and so then I'm just curious if you're also interested in ways in which studies would complicate the terminology, and you would accept that as long as it's well explained and framed. Okay.
Because that's part of the transformation.
Okay.
Of the idea.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I'm just wondering if publishing in this edited collection would then preclude publishing elsewhere of the material that we might be presenting on here. I'm new enough. Old, yes, but still new. That's a question.
I would say that.
Oh, sorry.
This is my take on it. I can't give you a specific answer, but my take would be that because it's a conference volume, there's an expectation that someone might be preparing some of the preliminary research, for example, or that you're presenting ideas in this chapter. Of course, it would have to be different. You can't do the same thing and send it out. But I do think the expectation is in a conference volume, you can use some of the same material and talk about the ideas. I don't know if you all would agree with me or not.
And I would just say that I would think it would need to be significantly elaborated or repackaged for a subsequent publication compared to what you would have here. I know in some fields it's common for the conference proceedings to then be to be republish something in a peer-reviewed journal, and that's not what I would recommend in that way. We would still consider this to be a complete, thorough, distinct publication. And then if we're going to be built into say a book, that's something to work out with the book publisher. If that's sort of the direction you were going, if you had previously published work on it.
The other hand, and I think it's a really good question, is that people present their work at conferences all the time and are part of conference proceedings or chapters. So it has to be, as Chris said, significantly different, but you do want to get your work out there. So, I mean, I have seen, we had a situation with a chapter where they said, oh, we've already sent this work somewhere else. And we said, can you send us what you have already sent out as an article so that we have a comparison with this chapter? It was so much the same. We said, we really can't use it unless you do something quite different, but you can't change your data. You can't change everything. So it really is how you're going to frame it. Perhaps you're going to ask an adjunct to the question that you would ask in a different kind of an article.
First, it looks like a great project. Are you looking specifically for papers from the conference turned into articles, or would you also include new papers inspired by the conference that are not what people present,
Yeah, and I think we decided that, yes, we would invite papers that were inspired by the conference as well. So it doesn't need to be something that was on the in the program here. Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, related to the theme. Yeah. Can you say that again?
I think we decided among us that we wanted, as I said before, if you've attended the conference, you've kind of been listening, even if it's a virtual attendance, you're sort of participating in a WAC conversation of whatever that may look like. Other questions? We're thinking because you're here, you're interested. So that's a good sign. And we really encourage proposals. It's not like we're going to be super picky and trying to cut down. We want a wealth of things to look at.
And for the sake of asking, is there anyone on Zoom? Should we check a Zoom question?
Is there anybody on Zoom right now? Somebody is. They haven't put anything in the chat. The 30th.
Did everybody get the call? Because we have a stack of them here.
For the chapters.
For the chapters,
chapter.
yeah.
In the neighborhood of 10,000.
Okay, because my inclination is just say, just write, just write it. See what you have to say. No, I think.
You did say, well, 8 pages is a conference paper. And I came in late, I don't know if you had already said, and 20 pages is an article or.
No, I know. I think, yeah, we don't often say that, but that eight pages doubled space is a 20-minute conference talk. And so I would think that 25 pages is good for a book chapter.
Which probably is right around that 10,000, age of 10,000.
In that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we're counting references in that word count. So.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Vicky, I wonder if you'd ask your question about IRB and, where that falls into things. Let's give this to you.
I think it was on Zoom.
They might be recording it.
Okay, so one of the papers in our proposal sets the context for some IRB research, and the context was an informal survey that we did as of graduates as part of our celebration of our program. And so that was internal. It was for the celebration. We didn't go through IRB. We're talking about it here as context and as how programmatically that's helpful. And then there is also an IRB piece of it. So could the non-IRB part that's institution, just the programmatic context, could that be part of the paper, or because it's not IRB, could it not be in there? Does that make sense?
You should.
To be honest, I have a couple of response. One is, I don't think it's specific to your institution. The second thing is, does the context mention any particular people, or could they be identified? I mean, okay, so that's not going to.
The survey was sent to 260 graduates who had won a writing award over a period of. So
I don't think you need.
We're just counting.
Okay, we call that aggregate data, and most aggregate data generally will not. I mean, they'll usually just say you don't really need to they give you a pass on it if it goes through the IRB. I would still check with your institution to make sure. But I know at my institution, if I were to do something like that, say I'm using aggregate data, nobody will be identified, then it would be fine. And the other part of it then is that these people actually responded. So they wanted to respond. I mean, that might be part of the equation when you talk to your IRB people, is that they didn't want to respond or be a part of this. Even if it was internal, they may not have responded, but I would, yeah.
One of the things that we've also come across in the international exchanges is when people submit something from an institution outside of the US, do they have an equivalent to an IRB when they're reporting certain kinds of human subjects research? And if that is the case, to let us know in advance what that equivalent is and whether they've gotten that permission or they think they need it or not.
I've also seen cases where when a study was done, but IRB was not involved in it. We've kind of worked with them to, for instance, create some footnotes that kind of explain how they made took reasonable steps to protect their participants as well. And so that there's still a signal of the ethical dimensions of research involved there. I have a question for all of you, which maybe just by show of hands, as you look at the topics and the overall theme, do you see your work reflected there? Maybe just raise your hand if you say maybe yes, maybe, okay, most say yeah, maybe sort of not sure. Yeah, okay. Okay, so it seems like there's some recognition of the themes and topics that's going on there. Would anybody want to share kind of what they're working on, how they see it fitting with this? If you don't have to, no pressure. Yeah.
I've been having some conversations with Tian Donahue about international WAC WID, and it's my perception, talking with lots of people in other countries, that WAC is somewhat underrepresented compared to things like the development of writing centers. Tian does not believe this, and she will go to great lengths to say the problem is not that it's not represented, but it's going to look different. Same with writing programs. So we're really interested in exploring the frames, the sort of perceptual frames through which we understand and think about WAC internationally. And that's kind of the project that we're working on.
Anybody else want to share? It's okay if you don't. Yeah.
So I've been working with 3 other colleagues on looking at where writing is located at in the university in 4 different countries, Romania, India, Nepal, and Colombia. And we've been working on this for quite a few years. One of the challenges that we've had, and I was trying to process if this would be the right place, so it is international, it's transnational, it's cross-institutional, and translingual as well. But one of the challenges that we have is to condense the data that we have and into a chapter when you cover 4 different countries and you have to provide institutional context and national context and all of that. So this is something that I didn't want to ask a question because it's specific to our project, but it does cause a bit of a problem because, you can't really, when you're trying to reduce it. Then we'll accept the invitation, if that's an invitation. But in something like this, I know it's too early for you to know how you would, because I assume the edited collection and how you organize it depends on the submission you receive. But I think in comparative studies, it would be ideal to have something like that, because then it really allows a genuine comparative approach with the right context and the argument. Thank you.
And I'll just say that kind of question, even though it's specific to your project, the problem isn't unique. right? So I'm glad you raised it, which is the question of scope. And, another approach, 4 chapters would be great. Another version would be to just focus in on a single sort of subpart. Like, for instance, just you raised the question of how is it defined, right? If WAC-WID is a very US centric thing. So just when it's located across these 4 institutions, how is it even defined? Is it defined as a program? Is it defined as a curriculum? Is it defined as courses? Is it, I think that, might be one way to narrow the scope just for the purposes of a chapter. And then your other data could be other publications. Right?
Like a book.
Yeah.
Thank you. I actually have a technical question. The timeline seems really tight to me. So if people are invited to submit in November and then the chapter's due in February, that just takes my breath away. And actually, in my personal case, I don't think I'm going to be teaching abroad in January. So I think I'm just out. I don't see, unless that deadline has any flexibility.
Yeah. I mean, we would rather have promising pieces in the collection than not have them, right? So don't hesitate to reach out on an individual level and ask, and we'll work with you, I would say. Does that sound reasonable? Yeah. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
We kind of assumed that we sort of assumed that some of it would have been done now or in terms of the ranking. I don't know. I do take it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, so I was presenting sort of a piece of dissertation data, and obviously not everything would go in one piece, but I'm curious if you could speak to sort of best sort of what pieces or what kinds of texts are sort of best suited for an edited collection as opposed to articles or other kinds of publications. As a grad student, I'm still figuring all of this out and navigating that.
Harry, I'm going to give this to you.
So within edited collections, they're chapters. Article looks different because it's usually in a journal. And I guess this is my opinion, which is that as a dissertator, you're kind of looking at your data and it's the first time you're going to present some of it to people. You want us to read it and see it. So it seems to me that the chapter can also be positioned that way, and that it's sort of exploratory. You're doing some things now that you're going to follow up with more data. Would you agree with that? I think, it has to have the scholarly pieces of it, but I do think that, you can't publish your whole dissertation. So with us anyway, but so to just talk about what piece of that you're going to present and it's still being massaged in a sense.
Okay, no, I know I'm graduate director at our school. So I want to, yes. So where are you thinking of going when you finish your degree? Because I think then also if you're going for a tenured position, articles versus chapters can come into play. And so just so you're aware of that, I mean, I think that that's a horrible distinction because knowledge is knowledge. But I think realistically, I would think about what would work best for you given your career goals too. I mean, I hate to say that, but
Can you elaborate? Because I'm thinking of a chapter in a peer-reviewed collection versus an article that's placed where, so it's the journal and what counts and,
And the
I don't mean to dissuade you in the fact, but I just want you to also think about it. I know some people don't. Okay.
And the third dimension of it is which sort of cut in the thesis is it what thematic part of it is that goes into a chapter and what goes into an article?
On that topic, I'd just like to say that from teaching a course, oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
From teaching a course for dissertation writers across the curriculum who have all their data but can't write or haven't written. What I've learned is that in many disciplines, they are expected to publish pieces of their dissertation before they defend. And if they haven't, that actually slows them down. So I think, maybe you're in Rec Comp and everything that's here is relevant, but it's not, we can think that's the way it is everywhere, but it is not that way. In many of the sciences, these students are hungry to get a piece of their dissertation published. Yeah.
Just another distinction between a chapter and a journal article that I would add is, a journal article is typically going to be standalone, whereas the chapters probably at the revision stage will be asking you all to kind of read across the collection and gesture out to other chapters to help readers see the through line across them as well. So it's not just a collection of random pieces.
Yeah, and just to that end, it will take longer because of that, right? Because then you'll have to go back and do that additional work when you think you're done and it feels done and you're not done.
And Jennifer says this having pretty much just finished editing a collection. So.
If you do submit, you will get feedback, a lot of feedback on a proposal and eventually a chapter if we ask you to then go forward and submit a chapter. So in a way, you can also see it as, okay, what kind of peer review literally am I getting from editors that can support me and will help me see where to go next with this dissertation.
I just remembered a technical thing. So the submissions happen through the WAC Clearinghouse submissions portal. So it's linked on the CFP, but of course, if you're just looking at the paper one, that doesn't work for you. They did email out the CFP. We do have a shortened link. I'll type it on there as well. Yeah, and the shortened link sends to the Google thing. I'll type it up on the screen so you can see it and then write it down too. AUD.IE/worldviews. Maybe it's writing worldviews. Should check that real quick. Sorry. Yeah. Well, I feel like I've said this a couple times this conference already, but we're not going to keep a captive audience. So if anybody, feel free to come talk to us one-on-one if you'd like to, and email us. And otherwise, we hope to see your proposals. So, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, do questions.